My name is Michael Thompson. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a financial analyst in Chicago. 6 years ago, I thought I'd found the woman I'd spend my life with. Her name was Lydia Miller, and she came from what you'd call an upper-middle-class family that owned a successful Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park. Looking back now, the red flags were always there. I just chose to ignore them because I was in love. Lydia's parents, Jack and Donna Miller, were the type of people who loved showing off their success. They'd laugh at others with this sense of superiority, always had some cutting remark about everything, and never once showed genuine gratitude for what my mother had done for them years earlier. Let me tell you about my mom, Patricia Thompson. She was a saint. Back in 2018, when the Miller family restaurant was about to go under due to some bad investments and the economic downturn, it was my mother who stepped up. She co-signed a $70,000 bank loan that saved their business. But that wasn't all. She also paid for a new $15,000 industrial oven out of her own retirement savings. And when Lydia's younger brother wanted to go to Northwestern University, my mom quietly covered his $28,000 tuition for his senior year. All of this is documented. I have every receipt, every bank statement, every email exchange. My mother kept meticulous records of everything because she was that kind of person, organized, thorough, and honest to a fault. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Now here's what really got under my skin. Despite everything my mother did for the Millers, there was never any acknowledgement. No thank you. No mention of her help during family dinners. Nothing. It was like they'd erased her contribution entirely and convinced themselves they'd pulled through on their own merit. I always found this wrong, but I didn't want to create conflict. I loved Lydia, and I figured her parents' attitude was their problem, not ours. I even swallowed my pride when Lydia dismissed the idea of including a small tribute to my mother during our wedding ceremony. Mom had passed away from cancer just 8 months earlier, and I thought it would be a beautiful way to honor her memory. But Lydia said it would be too depressing for what should be our happy day. I should have seen that as the warning it was. But love makes you blind sometimes, and I was definitely blind to what was coming. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Miller family restaurant, their pride and joy that my mother had literally saved from bankruptcy. About 60 people were there, both families, the wedding party, and close friends. Jack Miller, Lydia's father, took the microphone after the main course to give what everyone expected would be a heartfelt speech about his daughter. And that's when everything changed forever. Jack started his speech with the usual platitudes about how proud he was of Lydia, how beautiful she looked, how excited they were for the wedding. Standard father of the bride material. Everyone was smiling, glasses were raised, and the mood was warm and celebratory. Then he delivered the line that would destroy everything. "You know," Jack said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of superiority, "Lydia has always been smart about people. She can spot the ones who try to buy their way into feeling important." He paused, letting out a little chuckle. "Like when some people claim they've helped your business, but really they just forged a loan application to make themselves feel relevant. Good thing we've got smart accountants who caught that nonsense before it became a real problem." The room went dead silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Every single person in that restaurant knew exactly who he was talking about. My mother. My dead mother who had saved their entire livelihood and asked for nothing in return. Donna Miller, Lydia's mother, started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine laugh like her husband had just delivered the punchline to the funniest joke she'd ever heard. A few of their friends joined in, clearly thinking this was some kind of inside family humor. I looked at Lydia, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to defend my mother's memory, to correct her father's outrageous lie. She sat there in silence, staring down at her plate, saying absolutely nothing. I didn't explode. I didn't cause a scene. That's not who I am. Instead, I carefully folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and walked out of the restaurant without saying a word. I could hear the conversations resuming behind me, probably people asking what was wrong with the groom. I went back to the hotel where we were staying, the Palmer House Hilton downtown. I needed to process what had just happened. My mind was racing, but one thing was crystal clear. Jack Miller had just publicly accused my deceased mother of fraud. Not only was it a lie, it was the most disgusting lie imaginable. I was pacing around the hotel room when I realized I'd left my phone at the restaurant. I needed it for several work emails that couldn't wait until after the honeymoon. So I drove back, used my key to get into the restaurant. Jack had given me 1 month earlier so I could help with wedding setup, and headed upstairs to the private dining room where we'd been eating. As I was grabbing my phone from the table, I heard voices coming from Jack's office down the hallway. The door was cracked open, and I could clearly hear Lydia talking with her mother. I moved closer to the doorway, staying out of sight in the dim hallway. "Well, at least that settles the whole memorial thing," Donna was saying. "Now he can't possibly bring up having some tribute to his mother during the ceremony." "Exactly," Lydia replied. I was running out of ways to say no without sounding heartless. "Dad's little joke tonight should put an end to all that nonsense." "Your father was brilliant," Donna continued, making it sound like she was some kind of attention-seeking fraud instead of, well, whatever she actually did. "The important thing is that Michael got the message," Lydia said. "His mother is not going to be part of our wedding day. This is about us, not some dead woman's legacy." They both laughed. Actually laughed. I stood there in the hallway, frozen. It wasn't just that they'd approved of Jack's lie. They'd planned it. This wasn't a spontaneous, cruel joke. This was a calculated attack on my mother's memory, designed specifically to humiliate me into silence. I grabbed my phone from the table and left through the back entrance without them knowing I'd been there. But something had shifted inside me. The woman I was supposed to marry in less than 12 hours had just revealed herself to be someone I didn't recognize. Someone who would not only allow her father to slander my mother's memory, but would actively participate in the strategy. I drove back to the hotel, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the entire night organizing documents. Bank statements showing my mother's payments to Northwestern University for Lydia's brother's tuition. Copies of the loan application with both my mother's and Jack's signatures. Email exchanges between my mother and Jack about the industrial oven purchase. Receipts for everything. My mother had been a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm before she retired. She kept records of everything, especially when it came to large financial transactions. She taught me to do the same, and I was grateful for that lesson. By 6 in the morning, I had everything organized in a manila folder. Chronological order, color-coded tabs, highlighted key sections. If the Millers wanted to play games with the truth, I was about to show them what actual documentation looked like. The wedding brunch was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the restaurant, with the ceremony following at 2 p.m. Both families would be there, along with all the out-of-town guests who'd flown in for the wedding. It would be the perfect audience. I got dressed in my wedding outfit, a charcoal gray suit from Men's Warehouse that had cost me $800. I looked at myself in the mirror and realized this would probably be the last time I'd wear it. By the end of the day, this suit would either represent the biggest mistake of my life or the most important moment of it. I arrived at the restaurant right on time. Everyone was already there, drinking mimosas and eating eggs Benedict. Lydia looked beautiful in a cream-colored dress she'd picked out specifically for the brunch. She smiled when she saw me and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. "You feeling better?" she asked. "You left so suddenly last night." "Much better," I replied. Actually, I've never felt more clear about anything in my life. That should have been her warning. But she just smiled and went back to chatting with her bridesmaids about last-minute ceremony details. I waited until everyone had finished eating. Then I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. The room fell quiet as everyone turned to look at me. Lydia was beaming, probably thinking I was about to give some romantic speech about how excited I was to marry her. Jack and Donna were smiling too, looking smug and satisfied after their little performance the night before. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," I began, my voice steady and calm. "It means a lot to have family and friends witness what should be one of the most important moments in a person's life. A moment built on truth, respect, and love." I paused, letting those words sink in. However, I need to address something that happened last night. Something that has forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about the people I was about to join my life with. The smile started fading. Lydia looked confused. Jack's expression shifted to concern, and Donna stopped mid-sip of her mimosa. Last night, Jack Miller stood up and made what he called a joke about people who forge loan applications to feel important. He was talking about my mother, Patricia Thompson, who passed away 8 months ago from cancer. The room was dead silent now. You could hear the ice clinking in glasses, the distant sound of Chicago traffic outside. Jack accused my mother of fraud, in front of 60 people, about a woman who can't defend herself because she's dead. My voice remained level, but I could see people starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Now, normally I might let something like this slide, maybe write it off as poor judgment or a bad attempt at humor, but then I discovered something that changed everything. I reached for the manila folder I'd placed beside my plate. You see, after I left the restaurant last night, I came back to get my phone, and I happened to overhear a conversation between Lydia and Donna. They were congratulating each other on Jack's brilliant joke, laughing about how it would finally shut down any talk of honoring my mother during today's ceremony. Lydia's face went white. "Michael, I think you misunderstood." "No," I cut her off. "I understood perfectly. You planned this, all three of you. You decided that the best way to handle my desire to honor my mother was to publicly humiliate her memory and call her a fraud." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is the loan application for $70,000 that saved Miller's restaurant in November 2018. You can see both signatures here, Jack Miller and Patricia Thompson. My mother co-signed this loan when 3 other banks had already turned you down. I held it up so everyone could see, then placed it on the table and pulled out the next document. This is my mother's bank statement showing a $15,000 wire transfer to Restaurant Supply Depot for your new industrial oven. December 14th, 2018. Jack stood up abruptly. "Michael, this isn't the time or place." "Sit down, Jack." My voice was quiet but firm. "You had your time to speak last night. Now it's mine." He sat. I pulled out the next set of papers. These are tuition payment receipts from Northwestern University. $28,000 paid by Patricia Thompson for Daniel Miller's senior year. That's your son, Jack, Lydia's brother. Daniel, who was sitting at the next table with his girlfriend, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "And finally," I said, pulling out a small stack of printed emails, "these are email exchanges between my mother and Jack, discussing all of these arrangements. Here's one from December 2018. Jack, I'm happy to help with the oven payment. Family helps family, and I consider you part of our family now." I looked around the room. Every single person was staring at the documents, then at Jack and Donna, then back at me. So when Jack stood up last night and called my mother a fraud who forged loan applications, he wasn't making a joke. He was lying. Deliberately and maliciously lying about a woman who literally saved his family's business and asked for nothing in return except basic human decency. Lydia was crying now, but I wasn't finished. The worst part isn't even the lie itself. It's that my fiancée, the woman I was supposed to marry in 4 hours, not only allowed it to happen but actively participated in planning it. Because apparently honoring my mother's memory for 30 seconds during our ceremony was too much of an inconvenience. I closed the folder and looked directly at Lydia. I can't marry someone who would do that. I won't marry into a family that would do that. So I'm calling off the wedding. The restaurant exploded. People were talking over each other. Chairs were scraping against the floor. Someone's grandmother was asking what was happening. Jack was shouting something about taking things out of context, and Donna was frantically trying to shush him. But the damage was done. I could see people throughout the room pulling out their phones, some recording, others frantically texting. The video of me methodically presenting document after document, exposing the Miller family's lies and ingratitude, was being uploaded to social media in real time. By that evening, the various videos had collectively over 50,000 views. By the next morning, the story was trending on Twitter with the hashtag #WonkWeddingTruthBomb. The story got picked up by local Chicago news stations, then by national morning shows, then by social media accounts with millions of followers. The Miller family went into full damage control mode, but it was too late. Their restaurant's Google reviews were flooded with one-star ratings and comments about their treatment of the woman who had saved their business. Jack tried to post a statement on their Facebook page, but the comments section turned into a battleground of people calling him ungrateful and worse. Lydia texted me dozens of times that first week, trying to explain, trying to apologize, trying to get me to reconsider. But I was done. The woman I fell in love with 6 years earlier either never existed or had died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone who could laugh about slandering a dead woman's reputation. 3 months later, I heard through mutual friends that Lydia and her parents had sold the restaurant and moved to Phoenix. Apparently, the negative publicity had made it impossible for them to operate in Chicago. The aftermath wasn't something I had planned for or expected. I thought I'd make my statement, call off the wedding, and move on with my life quietly. I never imagined it would become a viral sensation, or that complete strangers would be debating the story on social media platforms across the country. But that's exactly what happened. The hashtag #WonkWeddingTruthBomb spawned dozens of similar stories from people who'd been in comparable situations. People shared their own experiences with ungrateful in-laws, family members who'd taken credit for others' generosity, and relationships that ended when someone's true character was finally revealed. What struck me most about the response wasn't the anger toward the Miller family, though there was plenty of that. It was how many people reached out to share memories of their own mothers, fathers, grandparents, or friends who had quietly helped others without expecting recognition. People who had co-signed loans, paid for educations, covered medical bills, or simply been there when nobody else would. One message that really stayed with me came from a woman in Denver whose grandmother had helped her neighbor's family avoid foreclosure during the 2008 financial crisis. The neighbor later claimed at a community meeting that the grandmother was a busybody who interfered in other people's business. The woman said watching my video gave her the courage to finally speak up about what her grandmother had actually done. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't really about me or Lydia, or even my mother's memory. It was about something bigger. It was about the fundamental question of how we treat people who help us when we're vulnerable. My mother used to say that you can tell everything you need to know about someone's character by watching how they treat people who can't benefit them anymore. People who are sick, elderly, deceased, or simply no longer useful to their ambitions. The Miller family had failed that test spectacularly. I took some vacation time from work and drove up to Wisconsin to visit my mother's grave in the small cemetery outside Milwaukee where she grew up. I hadn't been there since the funeral, and I needed some time to process everything that had happened. Standing there at her headstone, I felt something I hadn't felt since she died. Peace. Not just grief or anger or loss, but actual peace. I told her about what the Millers had said, about the wedding, about the viral video, about everything, and I realized that she would have handled the situation exactly the same way I did. Patricia Thompson didn't raise a son who would let liars rewrite history unchallenged. She raised a son who would stand up for the truth, even when it was difficult, even when it cost him something he thought he wanted. When I got back to Chicago, I found out that several news outlets wanted to interview me. CNN, Good Morning America, even some podcasts that focused on family drama and relationship stories. I turned them all down. I'd said what I needed to say, and I wasn't interested in becoming some kind of professional victim or revenge story celebrity. Instead, I focused on moving forward. I found a new apartment in Wicker Park, closer to my office and far away from any memories of Lydia or her family. I threw myself back into my work, picked up some freelance financial consulting projects, and started volunteering at a local nonprofit that helps small business owners navigate loan applications and financial planning. That volunteer work turned out to be more meaningful than I'd expected. I met dozens of entrepreneurs who were struggling to keep their businesses afloat, often because they didn't understand the paperwork or couldn't find someone willing to co-sign a loan. I found myself thinking about my mother a lot during those sessions, remembering how naturally generosity had come to her. About 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I got an unexpected phone call. It was Daniel Miller, Lydia's brother, whose Northwestern tuition my mother had paid. He was calling from Phoenix, where his family had relocated after selling the restaurant. "I need you to know that I never knew," he said, "about what your mother did for me. My parents told me they'd worked out some kind of payment plan with the university. I didn't find out about Patricia's payments until after the video went viral and people started digging into our family's finances." He paused, and I could hear the genuine emotion in his voice. "I want to pay it back, all of it. I've got a good job now and I've been putting money aside every month. It's going to take me a while, but I want to donate $28,000 to a scholarship fund in your mother's name." That conversation lasted almost an hour. Daniel told me that the family's move to Phoenix hadn't solved their problems. Jack and Donna were still trying to rebuild their reputation, but the restaurant industry is small, and word travels fast. They were having trouble getting suppliers to work with them, and several potential business partners had backed out after finding the viral video during basic Google searches. Lydia, he said, was working at a marketing firm and had changed her last name back to her maiden name after some coworkers recognized her from the story. She'd asked Daniel to find out if I'd be willing to talk to her, but I wasn't interested. There was nothing left to say. The scholarship fund Daniel mentioned became a reality about a year later. The Patricia Thompson Memorial Scholarship for Business Students was established at Chicago Community College, specifically for students whose families had experienced financial hardship. Daniel made the first donation, but over the following months, contributions came in from complete strangers who had heard the story and wanted to honor my mother's memory in a positive way. Looking back now, almost 2 years later, I can honestly say that canceling that wedding was the best decision I ever made. Not because of the viral fame or the vindication or even because it exposed the Miller family's true nature. It was the right decision because it forced me to choose between being comfortable and being true to my values. I learned that sometimes the people we love most are capable of disappointing us in ways we never imagined. But I also learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it costs us something precious, is what defines our character. My mother spent her life helping others quietly, without recognition, because that's who she was. The Miller family tried to erase that legacy with lies and mockery. In the end, their attempt to diminish her memory only made it shine brighter. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.